Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good day to the watchers of our webinars who will watch later our event. My name is George Tatar, and I am the chair of the Budapest Center for Dialogue and Mass Atrocities Prevention. And let me welcome you also on behalf of the co-organizers of the event, Mr. Steinar Brin from the Nansen School and Harald Weinberg from the Cultures Interactive. Let me say a few words to introduce our webinar today. I wanted to just mention that the emerging multipolar world, the growing alliance of two nuclear giants, China and Russia, and the escalating wars in Ukraine and the Middle East, as well as other numerous conflict situations in the world, nourish the uncertainty and concerns of peoples and enhance the fear of big catastrophe worldwide. But coming closer to the profile of my organization, an even more worrying fact is that according to some researchers, armed conflict is also the most significant factor for the occurrence of mass atrocities. So these negative international trends must be countered and halted, the sooner the better. Otherwise, the growing shadow of the Third World War would easily become a sort of self-prophecy. But we may not feel calm within our societies either. The report of the Varieties of Democracy Institute, they prepared a report on democracies in 2023, and they found that the level of democracy enjoyed by the average person is down to the level of 1985. A total of 60 countries are in the phase of regime transformation. I mean, they should choose between democratizing or autocratizing. One of the main findings of a survey prepared recently by the International Institute for Democracy and Electoral Assistance about how people assess democracy around the world has also shown that most people lack confidence in the performance of political institutions and governments. And moreover, people are much more skeptical than the experts in their assessments. And this is also a very serious warning for us. Behind these trends lies the gap between the decision makers and citizens, which we definitely must narrow. These phenomena forecast a rather uncertain and insecure global future where the trends move towards extreme situations and also towards eruption of violent conflicts. Being aware of these negative trends, of course, the $1 million question is what the humanity, what actually we people could do to halt and counter these processes. And my first response is definitely inaction is not an option. Obviously, for me, obviously, the first task is that we need to call the attention of the young generations that we should work systematically on peace, because peace is not a given. And should we want to live in peace, we must work on it. One of the ways for working effectively on peace is the setup of frameworks and institutions which would enable us to talk to each other, even if we do not agree on each item. Because if we better understand the reasons why we cannot agree, we make a step towards finding some common and shared perspectives. And at the end of the day, that leads to peace and the so-called shared societies. From that perspective, I find it necessary as well to work on the launch of dialogues in the case of both the Russian aggression and the conflict in the Middle East. We who are the co-authors of the initiative, we believe dialogue helps in that. And let me emphasize here in our small circle that dialogue is not a simple polite communication. Dialogue is a rather specific communication technique to handle complex issues. Institutionalization of dialogue, and through that inclusion of various groups of society in exploring various and diverse views on the emerging societal challenges, brings closer the citizens and brings closer the political actors, populations, and also divided communities. Apparently, this step is a tiny one, but it would be very significant from the perspective of human relations and joint thinking. In my personal view, progress and advancement of dialogue concept will also help build up not only shared societies, but also a shared European community, which would be rather integrating citizens instead of separating citizens. That latter option, separation of citizens, would happen if the concept of strong states in Europe, which is mainly promoted by autocratic actors, will be gaining further strength. Dialogue, therefore, should be made part of our daily lives. Each day we should work on spreading and translating into practice the culture of dialogue, and we want to achieve a stage where dialogue will become an organic part of decision-making procedures in both international and national terms. We, the co-organizers of the event, wish to contribute to these aims by organizing this series of webinars where we provide platform for prominent practitioners who share their views and experience in the context of dialogue. We seek by that to generate political will, it is very important, for implementing the concept of dialogue, and that is also one of the objectives why we have launched our initiative. It is a very encouraging fact that we are not alone in doing so. There have already been launched initiatives and activities which serve the same aims. The intercultural dialogue initiated by the colleagues in UNESCO and the shared society initiated by the Club de Madrid are very significant projects with similar rates, which we also mentioned, by the way, in the end of our initiative. We sincerely hope we shall be able to create synergies with these and other similar efforts. Today, in the forthcoming panel discussion, the representatives of the concepts of intercultural dialogue and the shared society will share their views and experience collected in this field. And it is also an honor for us that we can also welcome in our circle the national focal point for the responsibility to protect of the government of Slovenia. And as you know, right now, Slovenia has been acting as non-permanent member of the UN Security Council since 1st of January 2024. As to the continuation of our program, after the intervention of our panelists, you will have the possibility to pose questions. And after the responses, I hope we shall have some time for me also to present very shortly our initiative. I wish and we wish to help people to better understand the background of our and objectives and content of our initiative. So after this bit lengthy introduction, let us start the panel discussion. And our first panelist will be Ewan McVeigh-Jones, who is a program specialist at UNESCO. He leads research and provides technical assistance to support the effective governance of complex social development issues, particularly in fragile or conflict-affected settings. Ewan, I do hope that I pronounce your name correctly, Ewan. Also provides support to UNESCO's work on foresight and futures. And before his current posting, he led UNESCO's programming on social development in South Asia. And prior to joining UNESCO, he led and advised numerous social action projects. He has published, among others, on community-generated resilience, system approaches to social sustainability and inclusion, on the participatory identification of systemic risks in complex social systems, and some other important topics. He has been also recognized as a World Economic Forum Global Shaper. He holds a Master of Philosophy in Comparative Social Policy from the University of Oxford, and he's currently pursuing a Master of Applied Science in Data Economics and Development Policy at MIT. So, Erwan, the floor is yours, and please, you do have about 12 to 15 minutes for introduction. Please go ahead.
Thanks a lot, and thanks a lot to the Budapest Center, of course, for inviting me to be here today. I'm really happy to join you and to share a little bit of the experience about UNESCO's work on institutionalizing dialogue. I mean, we have, as you've introduced, the UNESCO framework for enabling intercultural dialogue, which is an approach that we've been advancing over a number of years. And I think there's a lot that we can draw from the experience that we've had developing and implementing this approach, to say something about how better to institutionalize dialogic approaches within governance. So as a little bit of a background, this work was born after a series of consultations that UNESCO did with our member states back in 2020 on how to engage with intercultural dialogue as a strategy for lots of different shared objectives around the SDGs. And these consultations and the findings from those consultations told us a number of things. They told us, first of all, that the concept of dialogue was very diverse. People were understanding it in lots of different ways, that very often the concept was rather vague, rather aspirational, rather normative, and not very operational, and that all of this was having a big impact on the effectiveness of operational work around intercultural dialogue. The second thing was that because of this reality, the impact of dialogue initiatives was often quite difficult to understand. Measuring what the impact of dialogue had on objectives related to peace building, related to inclusive social development, was often quite unclear. And because of these two realities, the political and the financial commitments for processes of dialogue was not seen to be very consistent. It was rather short term. It wasn't always with the longevity that was needed to make these processes effective. The consultations also told us a number of things about the realities to which member states at UNESCO thought that dialogue could respond. They talked about the fact that diversity is growing in the world. They flagged the fact that global mobility is a trend that's growing. It's been growing for a number of years. They talked about the interconnectedness of the global economy, and their thoughts that despite the rhetoric around protectionism, the interconnectedness in the global economy seemed there to stay. They talked about the reality of digital connectivity shaping these diverse realities as well, creating new fusions, new expressions of cultural collaboration, and that these were all being valorized through the creative economy as well. They talked about the fact that they believed there was a reality in the growth of fear and division in the face of growing diversity. They flagged statistics like the fact that 1 in 5 people around the world have been discriminated on the grounds of international human rights law. And they flagged that they thought this was perhaps not so surprising in the face of things like hate speech, the fact that there was growing economic precarity, that misinformation and disinformation are growing. And they also flagged a reality that they perceived for the need of dialogue in that the shared challenges that the world faces at the moment, from the climate emergency to managing digital commons to dealing with the growth of conflict, and particularly cross-border conflict, requires us to transcend some of the differences that we identify and some of the boundaries and borders that might be traditionally keeping us from having effective and transformative communication. So with all of this, with these needs, with these perceptions of the use of dialogue, we sat down and thought about what it is that we at UNESCO can do to address these considerations. What is it that we need to do to employ dialogue more operationally, to make it really transformational in changing perspectives, and being this tool that allows us, as you introduced, deal with complex global challenges. We identified a number of goals within all of this, and I think these definitely speak to some of the issues around institutionalization. We spoke about, we identified the need to make a case for why dialogue is worth investing in, proving its impact. We identified a need to make a better understanding of how dialogue works, actually looking operationally at what needs to happen and what needs to be in place for it to be, for there to be space and opportunity for dialogue to flourish. And we talked about the need to identify how to take these two first objectives and translate them into actionable insights, how we are able to take insights that we provide into actual operational actions and processes on the ground. And of course, none of this, as we've already heard, is easy. It's not easy because dialogue is necessarily complicated, it's complex. It's a process that's meant to bring about transformation in how we think, how we relate, and how we behave towards difference. And it follows, therefore, that it doesn't really take place in a vacuum. It's affected by all of the same forces or the same products that influence the world around it. Those structures of power, perceptions of fairness, particularly as they relate to material and sentimental inequalities, and also feelings of justice as well. And that because all of this, someone else
Piero, sorry, Evan. Piero,
no.
Piero, please. Piero. Sorry, Evan, but I wanted just to warn Piero that he should unmute. Piero. Okay. Okay. Go ahead, Evan. Let's hope. I will send him a message.
No worries. I was just saying that I think because of all of these realities, because of the fact that dialogue is taking place in this complex operating environment, and it has to do with sentiments that certainly transcend direct processes of dialogue itself, this requires a holistic view, and it requires us also to be able to translate quite complicated objectives into insights which are often more digestible. So we took all of this and we set out to create a framework that could help us understand what the enablers are for intercultural dialogue and put data behind it in order to prove some of the impact and some of the needs that sit there. We, as I say, try to prove the impact of dialogue and try and therefore encourage the necessary commitments and investments that need to be made over the long term in order to make it work and to really institutionalize it as a culture, as you say, a culture of dialogue, and try and make it more operational as well, putting these operational expressions forward as well. We spent a very long time with a lot of different actors from a lot of different places, reflecting on what those enablers might be and what the impact of dialogue might be to allow us to identify some of the measures. And when we were looking at enablers, we identified two levels of possible enabling force. We talked about the structural domains, these things that operate on a macro level and that are systemic elements in society and affect both social and institutional structures and are defined by things like policies and legal frameworks. We identified 5 forces there. We talked about freedom of expression, governance and citizenship, horizontal equality, social cohesion, and stability and non-violence. Equally, we identified 4 what we call supporting domains, things that work on the micro level and affect actually the process of doing dialogue, the principles, the values, the competencies that impact the actions to facilitate dialogue and the policies and activities that sit behind it as well as those individual interactions and engagement opportunities. We identified 4 things, as I mentioned, the first being inclusion and representation, the second being strong leadership and organization around processes of dialogue and commitment towards it, the third being linkages and coherency with other related processes and enablers as well, and the fourth being those skills and intercultural values which reinforce all of the predispositions of individuals towards processes of dialogue. So through a very long process, we identified indicators to measure all of this, and we collected data for over 160 countries. And with the framework and the data that we have behind it, we have some insights which have allowed us to not only reinforce the case, but also provide some operational direction, which I think certainly have given us at UNESCO a capacity to advocate and also to direct the institutionalization of dialogic approaches within specific contexts all around the world. I want to talk about a couple of the ways that we've done this. From the analysis that we created, we managed to create some quite interesting statistics and quite interesting notions of what impact could be, which have been very helpful in affecting our advocacy around these issues. We looked at the impact of supporting the enablers for intercultural dialogue on direct impacts related to social development and peace building. And we came up with a whole range of statistics which have been quite strong in making policymakers listen to why dialogue might be important for their concerns. I want to give you just a couple of these to give you a flavor of what this has been about. We've found that 89% of all global conflict was happening in contexts around the world where dialogue was failing. We found that violence against civilians was 98% lower in contexts where intercultural dialogue is thriving as compared to those where it's not. We found that contexts where dialogue is stalling score some 77% lower on internationally recognized measures of gender equality in comparison to those where it's well supported. And we found that 30% of people are living in contexts where dialogue is failing. 30% of the people living there live in absolute poverty as compared to less than 1% in those where it thrives. So all of this paints a picture of dialogue in some way affecting opportunity and affecting good governance, all of which, of course, we know lie behind opportunities for peace as well. We also drew out a number of quite interesting insights, which I think have been really useful for us to support processes of dialogue within specific intercultural conflicts. We know that the enabling environment for dialogue really is a systems issue, that you can intervene at any different level and all of the different enablers interact and positively reinforce each other. We found that financing, of course, is really important, but it's not everything. We found that with the right leadership, space and opportunity for impactful intercultural dialogue can be created despite financial limitations and opportunities to invest financially in the enabling environment for dialogue to work. We also found that the sequencing of investments in the enablers for dialogue was perhaps not as important as we previously thought. You can essentially pick and choose in any part of the enabling environment for making space and opportunity for dialogue to work, and know that it will positively reinforce the other areas, which I think is quite an important opportunity to gauge different opportunities for political expediency around investing in dialogue at different moments. So with all of this, we've carried a message forward, which has been very, very important, I think, in creating institutional commitment towards dialogue. We have also a whole package of country-level data which we produced, and we've been intervening in a lot of different contexts around the world. Just to name a few, we've been working in Sri Lanka, looking at some of the conflict risks around inter-ethnic conflict in the wake of the macroeconomic reform agenda. We've been working in Rwanda to support efforts for intergenerational dialogue around the memorialization and remembrance of the genocide. We've been working in Central America, trying to support the social inclusion of indigenous communities who have often found it quite difficult to interact positively with public health structures. And we've also driven a whole load of thematic initiatives as well around developing new approaches to intercultural competence formation, particularly to combat discrimination against migrants in different places of high migratory flow as well. So I would really invite you to read more about all of this work through the report that we produced. It's called We Need to Talk. It's available on UNESCO's website. I think there's a lot of quite interesting insights about the types of message which resonate in creating opportunities for dialogue to be institutionalized, some of the actual enablers and directional work that can help in operationalizing that institutionalization, and also some of the specific spaces and case studies that we at UNESCO have been working on to take the country level insights, the country level data that we produced around all of this and put it into practice. So I hope this has been of interest to you today. I'm really excited to listen to everything that comes in the rest of the webinar.
Thank you very much, Johan. That was interesting. And of course, the report, to read the report, it will help us a lot even to better see the details of this. I also have some questions to you. Maybe in the end, I will pose one. But right now, I would like to give the floor to Esther McIntosh. She is our second panelist, and she joined the Club de Madrid in 2022. She is the senior advisor to the club Shared Societies project. Esther is a governance and inclusive development specialist. She has 19 years of experience and in managing the implementation of governance and inclusive development programs in the Caribbean, South and Central Asia, Eastern Africa, and the Pacific. Previously, she served as the director of the Decentralization and Citizen Participation Partnership under the Papua New Guinea Australia Governance Partnership. She has also worked on policy reform and change processes in Afghanistan, in South Sudan, and Guyana. In 2019, she was appointed to the Board of Trustees of the Institute of Development Studies at the University of Sussex. Esther holds degrees in political science and history, and in governance and development from the University of York, and also the University of Sussex. She also has a diploma in rural development planning from the University of Pune in India, and she's currently a PhD candidate at the University of Leiden in Belgium. Esther, the floor is yours, and thank you very much for accepting our invitation.
Yeah, and it's lovely to be here. Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody. I prepared a presentation, just a brief one, just because to introduce both the Club de Madrid, who I'm representing, as well as some of the findings and definitions that we use, and I thought that would be useful. So if I'll just sort of quickly share my screen, and hopefully that will, yeah, and hopefully you can see that. And
yes.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll try to make it as brief as possible. Yeah, so yeah, thanks again. And this is a really great opportunity for us because, as it so happens, we are have just spent a lot of time with a range of partners talking about dialogue and about shared societies and how those two connect. So I just wanted to provide perhaps just a sort of a quick overview of some of those points that we included in our discussions, and then happy to expand on any of it in the plenary session. So just firstly, to introduce Club de Madrid, and I thought I'd introduce and share a bit of background on who we are, because I think it's really important to sort of frame and understand our work in the space of dialogue and what that means for us as an organization. So we are the largest forum of former democratic presidents and prime ministers in the world. We have 124 members who make up the Club de Madrid, and we have a small secretariat in Madrid that sort of manages the affairs of Club de Madrid. But fundamentally, we are an NGO, and we are currently we have a General Assembly, and we are currently the president of Club de Madrid, President Turk, is the former president of Slovenia, and the vice president of the club is Michelle Bachelet, the former president of Chile. And this has really informed the work that we have done since 2001, when we had started with a strong focus on democratic governance, as you see in the pillars of our work. So the main focus is on democracy and democratic governance, multilateralism and global cooperation. And then the final sort of key pillar for the shared society. So that's, you know, largely what I'll be speaking on today. But I think it's important to say that dialogue has been sort of part and parcel of the work that Club de Madrid has done since its inception, and it's a key strategy for affecting change and advancing the mission of Club de Madrid. So importantly, as far as creating a common understanding of what a shared society is, when we say a shared society, essentially we're referring to a socially cohesive society, one in which everyone can freely and equitably participate in a democracy, and one that respects human rights, dignity, and difference. And in terms of our understanding, you know, of how change happens, and that's been quite central for the work that we've done on dialogue. This is sort of underpinned by three key outcome areas. So one is around sort of individual action and leadership. So we focus a lot on political leaders, identifying and working with champions who can advocate and promote inclusive and shared societies. We also work now increasingly not only with governments, as we have historically done since this Club de Madrid's efforts on shared society started in 2007, but we also work very closely with civil society and private sector actors as well. And then one of the key ways in which we affect change is really around fostering linkages between, you know, the national and multilateral, sort of recognizing change as was mentioned previously, is anchored in systems, and that, you know, all of these institutions play a vital role, and all these levels of governance and decision-making play a vital role in affecting change. So I wanted to not talk so much historically about what we've been doing, because we've been working in a number of spaces, including around peace building and in a range of areas since our work in shared society started. But what we're doing at the moment is we've been sort of with a view to participating in a number of key forums and spaces, including the upcoming World Social Summit. We have been anchoring one of our sort of flagship events, which is our annual policy dialogue. This is usually hosted by a government. Last year, it was the government of Brazil. And the focus of the annual policy dialogue last year was on rethinking social development for people and planet. And it was anchored in UNRWA's approach to fostering a new eco-social contract. So I wanted to highlight some of the discussion that came out of a working group, because I think that this not only, a working group on shared societies that was a number of UN and other agencies participated in, including the UN for the former rapporteur for minority issues, Fernand de Varenne. And this, I chaired this third one of three working groups, but the focus was on, well, how do we realize a shared society? And this was a very good way to connect with the efforts of other institutions. And what I have sort of extrapolated from the paper, which is available on our website, is really some of the key recommendations that speak directly to social dialogue. And it's very interesting that this was such a substantial focus of the discussion, and a recognition that even though you know, it's generally understood that dialogue is important, there's a need to really strengthen what that means in practice, and to sort of deepen the practice and use of dialogue as a strategic sort of approach to policy and realizing SDG outcomes. So the first recommendation is around, and this sort of broadly reflects the experiences of countries and globally. So recognizing, especially with issues around shrinking civic space and the, you know, sort of reduction and in the number of countries that are considered to be democratic, that the importance of creating a space and guaranteeing those spaces that allow for social dialogue, enhancing opportunities at all levels for participation. So really looking at it from a multi-level approach, which includes, and there was a lot of discussion around dialogue being integrated in sort of decentralized and local government spaces as well, ensuring that, you know, power and decision-making is redistributed. And then another related to linking the, dialogue at the local or subnational and national level to efforts at the regional and international levels, and ensuring that these are connected and that they inform each other. And then further and lastly, it was around creating effective deliberative spaces that address some of these imbalances in sort of critical spaces around sort of the economy, the way that social allocations are made and are redistributed. I think one of the key sort of shifts coming out of this that was sort of formalized for us is not presenting shared societies as sort of a separate, lofty goal, that something that we should try to achieve or aspire to, but really looking at how shared societies can be anchored into all key sectors. We see this as very fundamental for ensuring that not only that shared society is understood by policymakers, but that shared societies is prioritized by policymakers. So whether it is around digital spaces or environment or any, sort of the economy or related to conflict, that is seen that shared societies is quite central to realizing those. So as far as sort of our reflections, I just wanted to sort of summarize some of that. And some of these points may sound quite prosaic, but I think when you look at the actual sort of experiences on the ground, I think it's really important to sort of reinforce some of these. So it's important to recognize, specifically because shared societies is about creating, an inclusive and socially cohesive society, the importance that dialogue plays for allowing those voices that are often neglected or that are not being considered in society. So dialogue is presents an opportunity or a way of engagement that allows those voices to be heard, and frankly allows the opportunities that are allocated to everyone, so everyone in society can feel that they have a voice and a role to play. And I think increasingly, because of some of the contextual risks and challenges that I've highlighted, it's more important than ever to recognize how fundamental that is. Practically speaking, and sort of considering risks and challenges, I think Ewan referred to some of those previously. There's issues around political will, around having a sustaining commitment, which is why institutionalization can play such an important role. And then the importance of strong institutions and not just assuming, making assumptions about the capacity or what institutions are capable of doing. And in general, as I mentioned before, adopting a multi-level and as well as a multi-actor approach. So we had representatives as well as part of last year's annual policy dialogue that, from the private sector. And I think that is a key group that also wanted to, for example, ensure that they're considered and engaged when we think about dialogue and participation and who our stakeholders are. More broadly, in terms of, sort of rethinking how decisions are made and how governance is understood, is sort of making a shift, which I think participatory approaches and deliberative democratic approaches, really align very closely with the use of dialogue, creating space for participation and opportunities for engagement. And then another key point for us is really the importance practically in all of this in identifying champions and those who can lead in processes of dialogue. And those for us include youth. So we had youth leaders who are usually in office at the moment, whether they're a minister of government or involved in some way in shared societies as part of the dialogue process. And that's, is a very important sort of way in which we work, is ensuring that we have a strong focus on leadership. But I think importantly, as well as there's, sort of many change processes that we've undergone, whether it's around gender or other sort of key issues like the environment, it's really about recognizing that it's a change in the operating culture and how governments work and being, more transparent, allocating resources to ensure that dialogue is fully resourced and that, it is effective and being more inclusive. So that, again, is not something that we should take for granted. And lastly, and this sort of echoes as well what was said previously, a strong emphasis on the importance of data and metrics, and using that to measure progress and effectiveness, and to drive our decision making and our understanding about whether we're being effective or not in terms of the change that we are trying to bring about. So I think I'm at about 12 minutes, so I'll stop now, and I'm happy to take any questions related to anything that I've said. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Esther. I think that the both presentations have just enhanced my feeling that we really work in the same direction and same way. So we need really to discuss it also later on, how to create synergies. So what sort of steps we could make jointly, and to convince, to generate the necessary political will, also at institutional level, also at the level of nations. Thank you very much. The question will come afterwards. Please, I just want to introduce Ambassador Blanka Jamnišek from Slovenia as our next panelist. She in 2015 she was appointed by the government of Slovenia as the national contact point for responsibility to protect. So this is the main field of one of the main fields of our activities as an organization. And currently she serves as a member of the steering group within the global R2P focal points network. She's also the deputy head of the Slovenian delegation to the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance. In 1996, she joined the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and she led there the department of the OSCE and the Council of Europe. She also served in the permanent mission of Slovenia to NATO and to the West European Union in Brussels. She was a member of the diplomatic teams for chairing the OSCE in 25, and also in the Council of Europe in 28. From 2011 till 2015, she served in Austria. She was the ambassador, permanent representative to the United Nations, OSCE, and other international organizations of Slovenia. She is strongly engaged in promotion of human rights education, and I wanted to underline this. It's a very important point. And she is the co-author of the Human Rights Education Tool for Children. It's under the title Our Rights, which was operationalized in almost all continents and in 27 countries. She holds degrees in psychology and in international relations at University of Ljubljana, and in international politics from Synergies, Brussels, and also the Université de Paris. In 2020, she concluded education for a mediator. So I don't want to continue the long story of your biography. Blanka, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for inviting me to the panel. I would like to talk about the dialogue and responsibility to protect in decision-making in the UN Security Council, because Slovenia has the non-permanent seat at the moment. But let me start with a little bit of history. So after declaring independence and becoming a new state on 25th of June 1991, Slovenia was one of the countries directly exposed to a mass influx of refugees fleeing from armed conflicts in ex-Yugoslavia in the months and years after. Being fully aware of atrocities being committed in its vicinity, the Slovenian authorities and also the population at large, ordinary people, promptly assisted these vulnerable people seeking refuge in Slovenia, and we still remain sensitive to such topics. This experience is one reason for Slovenia selecting a focus on conflict prevention and protection of population in particularly women and children, and becoming a strong supporter of the R2P, the principle of responsibility to protect, from its inception on. Perplexed by the atrocities committed in ex-Yugoslavia, particularly in Srebrenica and Kosovo, Slovenia's involvement with the issues of conflict and atrocity prevention, including in the UN fora, thus predates the 2005 UN World Summit, which concluded by endorsing the principle of responsibility to protect. In 2005, the permanent representative of Slovenia to the UN in New York was one of the two co-facilitators in these processes that led to the adoptions of paragraph 138 and 139 of the World Summit outcome document, and it concerns the principle of R2P. So Slovenia has consistently devoted significant attention to preventive diplomacy and mediation, striving to make these two areas, and this of course includes dialogue, we wanted to make this more prominent within the UN, and we have been actively involved in the formation of R2P, and we continue to promote it and support it, both on a declarative level, but also in practice. As you may know, we organize academic conferences, R2P in theory and practice, every 2 years for the last 10 years, since 2013. So we were also one of the first countries to appoint a national contact, R2P contact point, focal point, and I am actually the third one in a row, because we are usually diplomats and we change jobs. So I am the third one, and I'm trying to still actively support this this principle through our work in the group of friends, both in New York and in Geneva, also in the steering group. We are also part of the Accountability, Coherence and Transparency group launched in 2013 to advocate for more accountability, coherence and transparency in the work of the UN Security Council, by urging its members not to vote against resolutions that would facilitate prompt and decisive action in cases of genocide, crimes against humanity and war crimes. And Slovenia also supports the French-Mexican proposal that permanent members of the Security Council to refrain from using veto in the cases of R2P crises and crimes, of course. Now, I would like to continue with the topic of our UN security priorities, as Slovenia has the non-permanent seat in this year, in 2024 and 2025. So we are in our 4th month at the moment. But to go back to our slogan and priorities, let me tell you that our slogan is Building Trust, Securing Future, intended to reflect the areas in which, over our 33-year-long history since Independence Declaration, Slovenia has proven to be a credible partner in international relations, and the priorities of our country refer to exactly what I have been already saying: conflict prevention and respect for international law and protection of populations in armed conflicts, then the agenda Women, Peace and Security, as well as climate, peace and security nexus, which includes water and food security. So although the principle of R2P is not mentioned explicitly, many of these areas are closely interlinked with the R2P principle and atrocity prevention. So the outcomes during Slovenia's UN Security Council membership should not be measured by the number of references to R2P, but rather in terms of improvements for populations on the ground which are endangered by the 4 R2P atrocity crimes, which due to the limited capacity of our small state can only be achieved in meaningful cooperation with other UN members and international organizations, of course. So if I go down to the operational level, maybe it would be interesting for you to know about the work in the UN Security Council in March this year, so last month. We concluded our third month in this position during the presidency of Japan. The month was marked by the adoption of the resolution on Gaza, showcasing the leading role of the 10 elected, non-permanent, but elected members in peace efforts. Japan also organized open debates on the working methods of the UN Security Council and the role of women in conflict prevention. So if I go back to the resolution on Gaza, after a month of negotiations among the Security Council members, the United States submitted its draft resolution on the situation in Gaza for consideration on March 22. It was not adopted due to the negative votes from Russia, China and Algeria. Therefore, March 25, a few days later, became an even more important day. It marked the 170 days of war in Gaza, and the UN Security Council did adopt a resolution proposed by the non-permanent members, the so-called E10, which Slovenia is part of, and this resolution calls for an immediate ceasefire during the month of Ramadan, immediate and unconditional release of hostages, and the urgent need to expand the flow of aid into Gaza, because as you know, there is a tragic humanitarian crisis there, and famine actually is among the population, large numbers of the population. There were 14 votes in favor for this resolution, with the United States abstaining. So Ambassador Samuel Zboger, our colleague, emphasized during the voting explanation that we hope this significant day will signify the end of the pain, terrible pains and suffering of the civilian population. And the concise resolution sent the strongest message yet and served as a clear indication that the conflict must end. Yet it did not happen. And that's really a huge failure, as international law is not respected as we speak. The E10, nevertheless, the E10 group demonstrated its consolidating power in the Security Council and its leading effort in peace efforts, leading role actually in peace efforts. Slovenia emphasized the binding nature of the UN Security Council resolutions and called for speedy implementation of this particular adopted resolution, particularly for the immediate ceasefire, unconditional release of all hostages, and expedited assistance for life-saving efforts. As we go on, in March, the Security Council discussed also the report of the Secretary General's Special Representative Patton on sexual violence in conflicts following her visits to Israel and the West Bank. Slovenia condemned all forms of sexual violence by all perpetrators as serious violations of human rights and expressed concern over the findings of the report, calling for investigations. At Slovenia's request in the Security Council, a briefing was held on the conduct of Russian presidential elections in temporary occupied Ukrainian territories. Slovenia condemned the attempt to legitimize the annexation of Ukrainian territories through elections, expressed hope for the launch of a peace process, and regretted Russia's failure to invite OSCE observers to its elections. At the request of France, Ecuador and the United Kingdom, the Security Council also held a discussion on the Russian airstrikes in Odessa, one of which exploded near the convoy of President Zelensky and Greek Prime Minister Mitsotakis on March 6. Slovenia called on the Security Council to take action regarding the war in Ukraine and condemned Russian attacks on civilians and civilian infrastructure. The UN Security Council also held an open debate on promoting conflict prevention, strengthening all stakeholders, including women and youth, because, as you know, women and youth bear the greatest burden in armed conflict, so Slovenia advocated for their equal inclusion in all conflict prevention efforts. Now, I would like to really stress that conflict prevention should be the rule, not the exception, as people primarily desire peace, decent living conditions, and a secure future for themselves and for their children, of course. And my country, Slovenia, will continue to tirelessly strive for peace, and the UN must act as a global peace mediator. So dialogue is key. Now, if I have a few more minutes, I would like to present or pay some attention to one of the topics that are also important for prevention of mass atrocities and ensuring the impunity of mass atrocity crimes. Many years ago, and of course dialogue is necessary to achieve this, and it has taken years, over a decade actually, to achieve something that we have achieved and still have to work further. But let me explain about it. It concerns the Ljubljana, the Hague Convention. Namely, many years ago, more than 12 years ago actually, practitioners and legal experts from countries across 5 continents have concluded that the current international procedural legal framework for mutual legal assistance and extradition for the most serious international crimes is incomplete and outdated. This seriously hampers the ability of states to cooperate effectively between themselves in the fight against impunity. That is why a small core group of countries, namely the Netherlands, Belgium and Slovenia, started years ago a process which was later joined by other core group members from other continents like Argentina, Mongolia and Senegal, so we have most continents on board, that proposed to set up a modern procedural multilateral treaty on mutual legal assistance and extradition, which would facilitate better practical cooperation between states investigating and prosecuting these crimes, the so-called Mutual Legal Assistance MLA initiative. Following years of preparatory work, negotiations on the draft convention and so many dialogues, well, the last negotiations took place during a 2-week diplomatic conference in Ljubljana last May. And during this conference, 68 states adopted by consensus the text of the Ljubljana, the Hague Convention on International Cooperation in the Investigation and Prosecution of the Crime of Genocide, Crimes Against Humanity, War Crimes, and other international crimes. So this Ljubljana Hague Convention, which is a product of many dialogues and negotiations, is actually a landmark international treaty that will help deliver justice to victims of genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, and other international crimes by facilitating effective and efficient international cooperation in the domestic investigation and prosecution of these crimes. By doing so, it empowers national justice systems and also allows states to fulfill their international legal obligations in the fight against impunity for international crimes. This new convention was agreed in Ljubljana, but then later signed on 14th of February this year in The Hague, and that's why it's called the Ljubljana Hague Convention. And now it's open for signatures and ratification. Cooperations of countries to fight impunity could well advance investigating and prosecuting the most serious crimes, which I have already enumerated, and therefore I will use this opportunity also to invite countries to sign and ratify this new treaty to contribute to the fight against impunity of mass atrocity crimes. So, as I already said, Slovenia will continue tirelessly to strive for peace, and we believe that working together in dialogue with other countries and stakeholders can be helpful in achieving peace in so many places where it is needed. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Blanca. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your attention. Thank you for the panelists for the interventions, and let me also ask you to either raise your hands if you want to put some questions to the panelists. Please, right now, time is for questions. Don't be so shy, please. So it's usually Liberata. Floor is yours, please. Just unmute you.
Okay, sorry, sorry, I was traveling. I'm traveling, so I'm departure lounge, and my
No
connection
problem.
might not be maybe the best. But I just want to thank you again for convening this dialogue. I call it already. It's a dialogue, and I've benefited a lot from the panelists. I want to thank so much the representative from the Madrid club, because I remember I was accompanying my president in those days when he attended the Madrid club meetings. So I was happy to hear that they have widened the scope of membership beyond the government, because it was like an intergovernmental, very elitist, but now to include the civil society and the other stakeholders. So I wanted to commend them for that. But two, I also wanted to, maybe she said that we can get most of this information from the website, but I'm so happy that the way she explained the importance of dialogue in the multilateral context and the institution. So Madrid Club is one of those. So I don't have a question as such, but I wanted just to comment that the Madrid Club has opened up, even for people like us. Maybe we can also in the future participate as we continue with this initiative, good initiative of having dialogue. And dialogue, of course, in my end, it's always about creating understanding. The understanding, forming, of course, synergies, but also involving the most important people through the civil society. That's what the voice, you need that voice. And we bring, especially when I speak for the women, we bring that voice in this dialogue. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Liberata. Harald, please, you raise your hands. Do you have a question or a comment? Go ahead.
Yes, Sergi, hello. Can you hear me all right, everybody around? Because I'm also traveling.
It's okay.
I guess you can. No, just maybe a question later on, but just my appreciation. It's so encouraging and also pleasing to hear the very basic concepts, shared society, dialogue, participation. Now that might seem quite mundane to you, but I can explain. I'm currently on a big conference in Leipzig in Germany, and we are involved in right-wing extremism prevention. And as you might have seen through the press, that in Germany the numbers go up. We have our right-wing extremist party now, as other nations already did some years ago. I look at France and in Italy, and we have key elections this year, and are frankly a bit concerned. But that is in the media and the press. This is just the context of what I was going to say. Is what I realize here among us, being those that are engaged in preventing and democracy education and all the rest of it, there is and has always been a quite awkward discussions about whether we ought to, should, or may talk to the other side. that comes down to the statement, well, maybe talk to what's called Nazis. And that makes me always very uncomfortable, because who we refer to the other side, or even are quick in labeling Nazis, in some Eastern German states, are up to 25% voting potential, and we're getting to the point of wonder, well, we really need dialogue in unknown, for us, unknown ways on many levels of society. And it's just therefore that I feel so pleased in this very day, in this place, to hear this discourse so strongly. And the question to, maybe, but not only Esther, but to all of us, because Esther made the strong point that this lofty ambition to do inclusion and shared society, and also shared society in an area where 30% vote right-wing populist, and we need to get it on the ground. So we need to get an infrastructure of doing dialogue, or facilitating dialogue on the ground, and most of all, I would say, in the education area, but really in all the areas. And this is my last sentence. Any good ideas or a discussion on what we could do practically to get closer to shared societies, even in very tricky times, would be, I think, would be very helpful at this forum here, or in any other forum. Thank you, Ted.
Thank you very much, Harald. I also would like to encourage the colleagues that maybe bilaterally, maybe at a later stage, let's come together without panelists. I mean, just to talk to each other on the possibilities of implementation. Steinar, you raise your hand. Please go ahead.
I wanted to make a short comment. It was very refreshing to listen to both McVeigh Jones and Esther McIntosh, because as you said, we are really in this together. Before we started the panel presentations, I was just sitting here and talking with Esther and Tatar, and I was talking about the way we worked in Yaitse with the students fighting against the segregation of schools. And then I open, while you talk, your website, the UNESCO website, and I see references to that very process in Yaitse, where the students were fighting segregation. So we have been even already working on the same things. And Esther, Club de Madrid, we have been using here in the webinar Robert from Macedonia, and he actually is the government correspondent or government responsible for working toward a shared society in North Macedonia. And Zoran Zaev, who was the prime minister from 2018, he used shared society as his slogan during the election. And Ran is, I see you're here, at least I see your picture. Of course, Diva Taviva has been very inspired by Club de Madrid. Diva Taviva is an educational community in Israel with Palestinians and Israelis working together. And this just made me very, very optimistic. At the same time, I feel that here we are, people working along the same lines, but we don't have strong enough synergy effect of our work. And that is what the Budapest Center is now trying to do, somehow coordinate us, try to make us in a way stronger. Because my question is, when Club de Madrid have done so excellent work, when UNESCO have done so excellent work, still we look at the world where dialogue and diplomacy is failing big time, but it's not really failing. It's not being developed and used as a real option to prevent the wars from happening. Do you have any reflection on why this competence that you are sitting on have not been more heavily used the last decade.
Thank you
Yes,
very much.
I'm here, Steiner. Thank you for mentioning my name. I'm not with my camera open, but I'm here.
All right. You are most welcome. So I wanted just to call to ask the panelists. Please, you don't have too much time for that, but the question is very substantial. In case each of you could very shortly express your views and your response to the question of Steinar. Should we start with Blanca? Please, Blanca, go ahead.
I don't know if you hear me. I'm so sorry about the technical problem. You hear me?
It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. So yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to emphasize what Luke also wrote in the chat. That the necessary condition for dialogue is the willingness to participate in a dialogue, to be able to listen to each other and participate in good faith. And unfortunately, there are very many subjects that do not want to participate in the dialogue. And that's the problem. And if there is no dialogue, it can lead to processes that lead to atrocity. And that's exactly what should be prevented. So dialogue is a very strong element to prevent atrocities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You know how much I do agree with you. I mentioned to you that I have some similar experience here in Hungary. Esther, please go ahead.
Oh, well, okay, thanks a lot. And I was actually waiting for Ewan to speak first, but like really good comments and feedback. I wanted to just sort of say a few quick things in response. The first is, I think this question of like, why isn't more of it happening on the ground? And this, I must say, was a cross-cutting. So the way the annual policy dialogue is set up, we have a range of meetings and discussions, including in the, in the shadow of the, anyway, so a sort of key point I wanted to make is that, we can look at this from the perspective of what is not there. And I mean, but I think it's really important to look at, to build on those opportunities where it is present. And I think one key shift that I've certainly seen within my career is that there is more of an understanding now on the importance, let's say, of participation, of citizen participation, of citizen engagement, on the need to create these opportunities and spaces. I think what this session is sort of forcing us to think through is how do we sort of scale that and sort of make that more permanent and make that a way of working that doesn't currently exist. But to say that it's absent is not necessarily the case, right? And I think that's really important to build on, is that where there is some will and where there are already opportunities, that's always a good starting point. And it was really, we recently had a review and reflection exercise around shared societies, and it's really great to hear, of your experience with shared societies and how that's being practiced. But there was a lot of reflection on what didn't exist before versus over the course of the last 2 decades, what has been able to change. So in the context of sort of conflict and some of the immediate challenges that we have, it's not sort of looking at it from that lens, but looking at it and how do you sort of build this up over time so that it becomes a sort of a common and institutionalized practice. So I think that's a really important one. And I also wanted to say, I think this point that was made about, like the work that is being done by different entities is sort of disconnected. That's, I think, a very important point, because that's just a reality of what the sector is like at the moment, or what is a sort of an ongoing challenge. One of the things that was really interesting when we did the annual policy dialogue, for example, prior to that, we did a bit of a mapping. And it's interesting how networks are being, whether they're formal or informal, are increasingly being used by institutions like ourselves to connect with others, to connect with grassroots organizations, unions, and a wealth of civil society, government, and other bodies. So I think that some of those strategies that are sort of intentionally trying to connect our work, make sure that we're sharing lessons, that we're not duplicating effort, are increasingly important in terms of, really putting partnership at the center of how we work and ensuring that, we're disseminating, we're sharing, we're creating spaces for sharing. And then just lastly, on the first point, I think it's a really important one that was made about, the fact that some of these spaces can seem to be elitist or exclusionary. And I think that, all the way up to the multilateral level, because that also was an issue that came out in our discussions. And as a result of that, one sort of offshoot is that groups and other civil society entities are creating what they're calling, or what was referred to as, these multi-stakeholder forums, where they're acting outside of the multilateral system. So it's really important to engage. And I would also encourage, if anyone's interested, Club de Madrid, and especially under President Turk's leadership, has really put front and center the importance of keeping those doors open, whether it's on China, where we've recently had a lot of ongoing dialogue and engagement at the highest level, but just ensuring that culture of creating those opportunities informally, building up partnership and dialogue and discussion over time, as well as trust, which is central to all of this, is really what is needed more than ever. So, more than ever, that's where we need to put our energies and our understanding of how we can work more impactfully. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah. So let me give the floor now to Ewan. Do you have anything to add, Ewan? Please go ahead.
I think it's hard to add, because I think a lot of what needs to be said has been said. But let me just echo certainly the comments of Blanca to start with. I think there's definitely a crisis around the culture of dialogue. It's not in favor, it's not in vogue, and that's certainly something that needs to be changed. I think it maps into a broader crisis around shared values and understanding of what shared values are and getting behind them. So I think that's certainly something that is fundamental to asking the question from Harold. I think also, the point was raised in both my presentation, and I think Esther also pointed towards this. I think there's operational challenges in the way that we manage dialogue as well. I think it's true, certainly, that sometimes dialogue seems lofty, it seems aspirational, it seems out of touch. And there's a challenge, I think, in some of the concepts and the terminology behind dialogue, which make it sometimes a little bit distant from what people perceive to be reality, and also certainly a challenge for finding those synergies as well. I think we talk about the same issues and we talk about the same approaches, but with different words, and I think that sometimes presents a challenge in terms of forging that synergy and cooperation, and indeed coordination as well. I agree with the point of Esther as well about there being very good examples that need to be given more visibility, and we need to learn from what's going on and find ways to understand what's making them successful, and understand how to scale them as well. I think that's a really important approach that we can sort of do more of, because they are there and they're just not always given the visibility that they need to do. And I think we probably also sometimes identify the same good examples, but maybe there needs to be more of a systematized framework for identifying what makes them successful. And that's part of the work that UNESCO has been trying to do around this framework for enabling intercultural dialogue, is to look at some of the systemic features that make dialogue possible, make it successful as well, in terms of driving this sort of transformative communication that actually drives some of the outcomes that we're all talking about today.
Thank you very much. Actually, I just wanted to say that this is the most difficult thing, to create synergies, because people who are included, they say, okay, I am ready to cooperate, but I am ready to coordinate, but I don't like to be coordinated. So this is the usual stuff what we have to somehow overcome. in this, but believe me that the idea is here that we have to do something jointly together and try to find the best ways how we could promote this whole cause through our diverse channels and by seizing the opportunities. So this is my idea, but let's discuss this this later on. I just try to look who else is going to pose any question. I don't see any hands raised. Then we still have these 5 minutes where probably I could present. I don't know why you stayed on my screen. Oh, it's okay now. Okay. What I wanted to do now is that to show you a very new diagram, which do you see it? Hopefully you do, which is actually the summary of our initiative.
We're not seeing it. Sorry,
we don't see it. We don't
sorry,
see it.
wait. Okay, wait. Wait a short second. Wait a short second. Okay. Yes. Now, do you see it?
It's coming. Yes.
Okay. So
we can
this
see
is
it. We need to enlarge it maybe a bit, but we can see it.
all right. So look, this is the diagram which we designed just for how to say sum up the content of our initiative. So here you can see the context, which is about the in what environment we would like to make this institutionalization, and we speak about here the new world order, where we need new tools to improve the multilateral decision-making mechanism. We have the social systems which are not able to manage sustainably the societal transformations and improve the understanding between citizens. There is no distinction, unfortunately, in the mind of very many people between dialogue, polite communication, debate, negotiation, and mediation. Sometimes people confuse this and they say, okay, everything is dialogue, but which is not true, as we know. Unfortunately, the political actors, we spoke about it, they act in a very traditional way. They use the traditional tools of governments, and there is a real lack of political will of listening. Also, Rick has mentioned it in his message, listening and hearing the others. And of course, there is a decline, acknowledgement of decline in the use of dialogue. But in this context, we want to make this intervention through, we do believe that dialogue, which is a specific technique to sustainably handle the complex issues, is something what we promote. I want to underline here, but that we may not expect too much from dialogue. Dialogue is not a panacea. It is not a magic tool, but nevertheless, we have to promote it. It's also a problem that we speak about dialogue, but the processes which are in place now are rather sporadic and rather ad hoc. So we have to really institutionalize this in our daily activities. There are a lot of declarations, as I said before, to engage in dialogue, and then this just remains some words. and we don't translate it into practice. So that's why we need to institutionalize dialogue. And we also, for institutionalization, we think that we need to set up the structures, the mechanisms, to include it in the mechanisms, and also to raise fund the funds, resources, ensure resources. So the process of institutionalization will consist of the following steps. So firstly, we shall have to make this alliance for dialogue a very loosey framework of some NGOs and maybe some other people who will want to join us, who will promote this idea, because it will not happen during one day or one night. So we shall have to dedicate long and patience and attention to it. Then we need to generate by our activities, we need to generate this political commitment. And then the main tool would be setting up these dialogue rooms and mechanisms in both terms, in the multilateral organizations and also at national levels. And then I think that we have to make the first steps indeed to set up some pilot projects, which would be necessary to do also at local level and also at the level of the multilateral organizations. And based on that, we could maybe further develop the idea. And the very last point, very important last point, is the build up of capacities in education and the capacities of staffs. Here, in that respect, in building up education, I think so we still have some home tasks together with Harald, and also, so far I know, we do have in our circles some other professors. I don't want to mention them by name because they didn't give me the permission, but I do reckon and do rely on their activities as well. So that was practically what I wanted to say very shortly. And of course, the diagram will remain on the screen of the record, and people will have the possibility to have a look in a very calm manner what we wanted to present now. Although the time is over, or the official time is over, if anybody has any question, any comments, please feel free to do it. And obviously, if somebody will want to leave our company, don't hesitate to do that. I do hope that if you have some questions, please feel free to pose it. Okay, you are exhausted. Okay, so in this case, firstly, I would like to thank the panelists who have joined us and who have expressed their views, and I do believe that we shall develop some further collaboration. At least on our side, the political will be in place. And I can promise it also on behalf of Steinar and Harald. Secondly, I want to tell you that we shall edit a bit this webinar, and we shall, after the edition, I will share with you the links. We shall also put it on our website, and I would also encourage you to put on your own websites, and feel free to use it during your future activities. And then, according to our plan, we shall have the next 1-2 months. By the end of May, we shall use it for further developing the initiative, and afterwards we shall start collecting the supports, the signatures, the political supports for the initiative, in order to be able to present this paper and the initiative for the multilateral organizations, including the UN Security Council Staff Secretariat, the African Union, OSCE, European Union, etc., and just to start generating the political will in the late autumn. So this is how I do see now our schedule, and I do hope that there will be no further delay in implementing our ideas. If you don't have any question, any comments, and I still look at you, okay, then I would like to thank again and to say goodbye to you and reckon with your future cooperation. Thank you very much.
Thank
Have
you
a nice
very much,
evening.
George. Thank you. We appreciate.
Thank you very much.
All the best. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. It was fascinating. Thank you.